This is Plant-Based Briefing, Saving Billions of Animals from the Food Supply Chain by Lee Kelly at faunalytics.org. And I'm Marian Erickson, host of this curated content plant-based podcast, where I narrate articles on plant-based and vegan living with permission in about 10 minutes or less every weekday. And I'm pleased to have permission from Faunalytics to share their content. They're a nonprofit, and they provide animal advocates with data to understand how people think about and respond to advocacy, and essentially providing the best strategies to inspire change for animals. They have a free online research library where they have summaries of thousands of studies, articles, public opinion surveys, blog posts. And today's episode is a study summary written by Lee Kelly. She's currently a graduate student at Northwestern University pursuing an MA in Public Policy and Administration. After receiving her BA from Pitzer College in 2021, she worked at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine for a year. She's been vegan since 2015 and hopes to use her policy skills to continue advocating for animals. I love that there's such a wide array of skills out there and people are using these wonderful skills for the same cause. So now let's get to today's plant-based briefing. Saving Billions of Animals from the Food Supply Chain. Summary by Lee Kelly. Original study by Clara J., Breman G., and Scherer L. Meat wasted in the global food supply chain equals an estimated 18 billion animal lives annually. This study explores how to address the problem. Research on sustainable food systems has increasingly prioritized the issue of food loss and waste, FLW, as about 1/3 of all food meant for global human consumption, 1.3 billion metric tons per year, ends up discarded or lost somewhere along the food supply chain. Some national and international governments have started setting goals for food waste reduction, with the United Nations including such a target in its 2016 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. Meat loss and waste, MLW, represents a particularly harmful part of global FLW, in part because animal products have a proportionally larger negative impact on the environment than plant-based foods. However, according to the authors of this study, previous analyses estimating FLW have neglected animal welfare considerations in their calculations of MLW. This study seeks to measure animal suffering and lives lost as a dimension of MLW. The authors rely on the assumption that whether or not one believes people should eat animals, it is especially unnecessary to kill animals who end up discarded, serving no use at all. Their ultimate aim is to make these animals' lives more visible to the public, adding yet another urgent reason to reduce MLW and switch to a more compassionate, sustainable food system. Utilizing 2019 global food and livestock production data from the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, the researchers employed established methodologies from previous FLW studies to estimate MLW for 6 species: pigs, cows, sheep, goats, chickens, and turkeys, across 158 countries. They examined 5 stages of the food supply chain: production, storage and handling, processing and packaging, distribution, and consumption. The calculation primarily focused on quantifying meat loss in carcass weight and excluding non-edible parts, with the use of specific loss factors tailored to each stage of production and global region. In 2019, an estimated 77.4 million tons of pig, cow, sheep, goat, chicken, and turkey meat were wasted or lost before reaching human consumption, the equivalent of approximately 18 billion animal lives terminated for no quote-unquote purpose, referred to as life losses. Of these, 74.1 million were cows, 188 million were goats, 195.7 million were sheep, 298.8 million were pigs, 402.3 million were turkeys, and 16.8 billion, or nearly 94%, were chickens. On a per capita basis, this represents about 2.4 wasted animal lives per person. The majority of animal life losses occurred in the first and last stages of the food supply chain, production and consumption. However, patterns varied significantly depending on the region, with consumption-based losses predominant in North America, Oceania, Europe, and industrialized Asia, and production-based losses concentrated in Latin America, North and Sub-Saharan Africa, and Western and Central Asia. In South and Southeast Asia, losses were highest in the distribution and processing and packaging stages. 10 countries accounted for 57% of all life losses, with the largest per capita perpetrators being South Africa, the US, and Brazil. China had the most life losses overall, with 16% of the global share. The researchers found that higher GDP regions showed the highest animal life loss per capita compared to lower GDP regions. Sub-Saharan Africa had the lowest total and per capita life losses. The authors found that making MLW as efficient as possible in every region could save 7.9 billion animal lives. Meanwhile, reducing MLW across the food supply chain by 50%, one of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, would spare 8.8 billion lives. Such reductions assume that the same number of animals can be consumed while greatly decreasing the number of animals killed simply to be wasted. However, the authors provide a word of caution about taking steps to address MLW. For example, although cows had relatively low life losses compared to chickens, they note that cows represent immense environmental impacts versus other species. Similarly, focusing on reducing ruminant life losses and ignoring chickens and turkeys may inadvertently cause even more total life losses and animal suffering. Thus, it's important to consider both environmental and animal welfare goals in any intervention. It's important to remember that the study was based on estimates with several limitations. For example, although the authors included inedible parts of the animals in their calculations, global regions may differ in what they consider to be inedible. Furthermore, the quality of data varied by species and country, and in general, the authors point out that their analysis may be skewed towards a Western perspective. For advocates looking to reduce MLW, interventions may be best targeted at North America and Oceania, which causes both the highest per capita life losses and the highest per capita greenhouse gas emissions. On top of this, production-based MLW seems to be higher in lower-income countries, which have more difficulty creating successful interventions, so higher-income countries should bear more of the burden of reduction, especially on the consumption side. Importantly, though, advocates should also ensure that policymakers and consumers are aware of the extent of animal lives wasted in the food supply chain and how this affects the environment, people, and the animals themselves. You just listened to Saving Billions of Animals from the Food Supply Chain by Leah Kelly at faunalytics.org, and I'm Marian Erickson, your host. And as always, I put a link to the original post in the show notes, and from there you can link to the full text, the original article published in Science Direct. And this is just heartbreaking, like all of it is, but maybe people who don't care about eating animals or don't want to change their eating habits can at least have empathy for those animals that are killed for no reason. So this is really good information, I think, to share with people. Those numbers are staggering. Even the 2.4 wasted animal lives per person per capita. Just wasted. Hopefully that's going to resonate with some people. So please share this episode with anyone who might benefit, and thanks for listening.